Okay, guys, let's talk about the iPhone 14 Pro. I know this is not usually the type of video that you would expect from me. I've never done a review ever, mainly because there are a ton of other creators who are way better at that than I am. So this is not a review. This is not that. This is just something that I made. And I decided to make it because there are just some things that I think you should know, or at least that I want you to know, that some of the people that you are watching are simply not conveying to you. I'm not doing any type of fancy B-roll showing you the phone up close or anything like that, because why? You know what the phone looks like. You've watched a ton of videos before you watch this one. That's not what I do. I just want to talk about the phone. This is one of the more questionable upgrades, at least for me, that I can think of in like a long time. There's nothing really that I'm absolutely thrilled about when I'm holding this phone. So it makes it kind of weird for me, to be honest. Don't get me wrong, this is an amazing phone. But so is the 13 Pro, and so is the 12 Pro. You see where this one is headed? My point is, if this one is hard for me to justify this year, it's probably a lot harder for some of you out there. Here, to be fair, let me just tell you some things that I like about it. The display, it's brighter. It's a lot brighter. I like that. The photos, and particularly the video, at least I've noticed, that come out of this is better than the previous model. But not by a lot. Like, I have an eye for this. I make videos for a living, so of course I notice. But if you handed this to, say, your mom and asked her to pick out which photo and video came from which phone, the 14 Pro, the 13 Pro, the 12, she wouldn't know, man. Action mode, Apple's new software-based video stability feature, that's cool, works as promised. But for me, it's a bit of a gimmick. It's more of a party trick right now, because unless you have a lot of light, like if you're outside, if you're doing this anywhere else and you don't have enough light, the video in action mode is just too flickery and too artifacty to use it for anything else that's not just for fun. It reminds me a lot of when slow motion came out on cell phones or smartphones a few years ago for the first time. It was like, yeah, I'm glad we can do that now. That's cool, but it kind of looks like it was recorded on a calculator. So, the A16 chip inside this thing is super fast, but so is the A15 chip, and the A14 chip, and even the A13 chip. Apple Silicon has been so fast for so long that it's kind of hard for us to outrun it at this point. And finally, I do like Dynamic Island, but we'll talk about that in a second. There are just two things about this phone that, at least on the surface, stand out to me as new. Like, if a regular consumer saw it, they would know that their iPhone doesn't have that. This is new. Sure, minor updates sort of across the board, but really, if we have to boil it down, two things. Always on display, Dynamic Island. In regards to the always on display on iPhone 14 Pro, I have it turned off. It literally just upset me. When it comes to any other always on display from any other brand, the screen is off. It's just notifications in the clock that you can clearly make out, that you can see. The rest of it is off. With this, it is not that way. I'm sorry, but it is just bad. I get it. It's different. They did make it different than any other always on display that's on the market because they're Apple and that's what Apple does. It is more complex than what I'm about to make it out to be, but it doesn't matter what it is. It matters how it makes you feel. And it makes me feel anxious. When you set this thing down, the screen looks like it always does, but just with the brightness turned all the way down. And I'm sorry, but for the last 10 years of me using iPhones, Apple has trained me that when I look down and I see my screen is lit up, that means I have a notification. So when I look down and see this thing as it is, always on, I assume I have a notification, I pick it up, nope, no notification, it's just the new feature. That happened to me so many times during the day that I just couldn't anymore. I could not. And on top of that, my battery life with the always on display enabled was significantly worse than what I was used to before. So it made me anxious, it made my battery life worse, and it basically just ruined my life. Okay, here you go. Now let's talk about the Dynamic Island. I like it. I actually like it a lot. I think it's cute, it's smooth, it's responsive, the animations are great, especially on the 120 hertz display. It is useful. I like how they took what was gonna be a horrible design sore of this phone And they sort of blurred the lines between hardware and software, made it useful and cute. Core apps use it. It kind of works as a multitasking thing at times. Third-party apps use it-ish. More third-party apps will use it in the future. It really does change the experience that you have with the iPhone. It's cute. It's useful. I like Dynamic Island. There were a couple times, though, just a couple where I wished I had the notch back, because at least the notch committed, right? With the Dynamic Island, there's just a little bit, just a tiny sliver of screen up there, which means a tiny sliver of stuff shows up there, and it just gets in the way sometimes. FaceTime calls, for example. I've been on calls where the top of somebody's head is above the Dynamic Island because it shows you information, but that means the Dynamic Island itself right in the middle of the forehead. It's kind of laughable, honestly, sometimes, but just minor annoyances here and there. At the end of the day, if I had to choose, there's enough positive here with the Dynamic Island that I would still choose it over the notch. It's just too cute. So, okay, myself, what does all of this mean? I want to be able to boil this down for you, tell you why I made this video in the first place. If you have an iPhone 11 Pro or anything older or a non-Pro device, yes, this phone, the iPhone 14 Pro, is an upgrade for you. But if you're on an iPhone 13 Pro or even a 12 Pro, then let me put it to you this way. This phone, the iPhone 14 Pro, is more luxury than an upgrade. And I'm lucky. I'm very lucky in the sense that I can afford this luxury. But that's kind of all it is. It really just comes down to how badly do you want to experience the Dynamic Island on a daily basis? Say a whole new phone amount? If you've got the money to blow and it doesn't really matter to you, hell yeah, buy this phone right now. It's amazing. It's great. It's awesome to have. I'm glad I have it. But if you're watching this video because you're struggling to make a decision on whether or not you want to upgrade your 13 Pro or even 12 Pro, shell out your money for this brand new shiny 14 Pro, I would say don't. Just wait till next year.